Hello and welcome to the first Jack and Joe show of the 2023-2024 season. Joe Sansom, it's been a hell of a long time, but we have so much to talk about, good and bad.
Yeah, I think when we thought we were going to be making this, we were expecting it to be a bit more positive. It's definitely been a better week for Fulham, and more specifically, a better weekend when a fair amount of good news has flowed through for the first time in what seems like an eternity. It's been so doom and gloom on the Bird app. It's been so doom and gloom on all socials, really. I think the feeling is that this was the summer where we had to push on, and we weren't really doing that until this weekend. And it feels like now there's a bit more of a clean slate that we can talk about. And we saw that on Sunday night against Brentford in our first pre-season friendly of the season, Jack.
Yes, for context, we are recording this on the Monday after the Brentford game. Fulham beating the bus stop in Hounslows by 3-2 in what was a balmy game. And all those Premier League Summer Series games have been pretty high scoring, and it didn't disappoint last night. We were not going to go over individual goals and individual performances, but we could just give a recap of how we thought we played. I will admit, I saw bits of it. I've seen the highlights. But a lot of fans are impressed with a couple of the youngsters that played. Joe, great goal for Harry Wilson. Bobby Reid with a sumptuous goal. And Vinicius as well. And the one negative, well, the two negatives, no Mitro involved. We'll come on to Mitro later. And a dislocated shoulder for João Palhinha, which actually could be a blessing in disguise in terms of transfer talk, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw, so I watched the game, as I'm sure many did on Sky, which is wonderful that we can have access to all these summer series games, and in particular the three Fulham games, of course. Looking forward to Villa and Chelsea next week. Yeah, the Palhinha thing was one where you're watching the game and you see someone go down, and you just think, "Don't be Palhinha." And I don't want any Fulham player to get injured, but you're thinking specifically, "Please do not be Palhinha." Um, Obviously, then you see the number 26, and your heart just sinks. Um, Palhinha was playing at centre back because we haven't recruited any centre backs yet. It was something that probably shouldn't be happening. You know, Tosin apparently has a knock. Tim Ream's still not quite recovered from his injury at the end of last season. Um, the whole reason he was in that position to get injured was a very unfortunate circumstance in itself. Um, and it's just one of those things where you're just now hoping for the best. You're hoping that he's back as soon as possible, preferably before the start of the season. Because there weren't really any other game negatives from the game itself. You know, it was I thought quite a decent performance considering we were early on in the season, in the pre-season in terms of fitness. You know, the conditions were very difficult in terms of the dry pitch, in terms of the feisty opposition, in terms of the high temperature. But I thought the team acquitted itself really well. Some great goals, as you said, and all in all, a very entertaining match and great to get the win. Great to have some young players involved. Great to have the majority of our first team available for it, and the majority of our first team seeing through the game with some great performances. And long may it continue in the summer series. We've got the Villa game up next, which will be, you would have to say, potentially tougher opposition. And then Chelsea after that, which is the one out of the three, let's face it, we'd all want to win, even though pre-season doesn't mean too much. But yeah, I was impressed with what I saw last night. But for me, Jack, and I think we should come on to talk about this now, the main thing for me was that before the game in the afternoon, the Silva shenanigans cleared up in terms of, we know that he's rejected the offer from Saudi Arabia, where it's 20 million salary a year for 2 years. And I'm quite amazed he's turned it down. And it was such a lovely feeling before the game, seeing him on the sideline and not having to be worried about that for a few hours.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing saga. One that's looked, a few weeks ago at the end of June, like it was on the cards, then went away, and now we're at the end of July, and it looked even more like it was on the cards. And you see the money that players have been offered this window from Saudi Arabia, and they've taken it, or they've been tempted by it, like we'll discuss later. But for a manager as well, it's the first real Premier League manager that's been pipped or at least sounded out by Saudi Arabia. And it's eye-watering numbers. I mean, if you're you know, if you're any person getting offered £20 million a year to still manage quite high up in the game with some decent players in a league, you would obviously be tempted. But this is brilliant news for Fulham fans because it actually speaks so much about us as a project, Fulham as a project, where we are right now. Marco Silva as a man, people were saying, well, he'll go now because of his history with Watford and Hull and Everton. It was very, very easy to say that, but it does feel like, and we've said it before, that Marco has done a lot of learning in his absence away from England, and at the first sign of a move away, he's just rejected it. And of course, there would have been an element of temptation to it because the board, weren't producing in terms of signings, and it just so happens that when the talks accelerated with the Khans over this deal, now we're seeing a flood of rumours that are getting very, very close to signings. It makes sense, but for Marco Silva to have put faith in us as a club and in his squad, it's hugely commendable, and I have the utmost respect for him. But Marco will be here next season. Whether he signs a new contract, we shall see. I'm sure he probably would if he gets what he wants in the market. But you do now would say, Joe, surely if it's all going very wrong this season, no matter what, I would not sack Marco Silva. I think that's absolutely unforgivable if that happens, and hopefully we're not in a position where that's a possibility, Joe. It's brilliant that Marco's staying on, and speaks volumes about us as a club, and a lot of respect has to be given to him from not only our fan base but the wider football community.
Yeah, I think so. I think we all sort of assumed as soon as the offer came in that he was going to go. I think you can tell that he hasn't been happy this summer, same as last summer. And let's face it, there's a correlation here. Pretty much every summer, the manager of Fulham has complained, and you can see why. It's the lack of transfer activity, and this flurry of rumours and potential incoming signings, which we'll go on to talk about, is great. But this should have happened a while ago. We should have been prepping these things. Willian nearly fell through. I mean, that was unforgivable if we don't know that happened. That should have been done, to be honest, end of June. Same way that I think Marco's contract should have been done by now, and he hasn't committed long term yet. He's committed short term, great. He hasn't committed long term. I do think there is an element of it where Silva's complained about signings, which I've just said is very valid.
Mm-hmm.
You can also see it the other way around. What signings are going to commit to moving to a new football club when they don't know who the manager is going to be? So it's a double-edged sword where, someone has to blink first. And luckily it seems that Silva, by saying he's going to stay for this season, has blinked first. We can now progress. The uncertainty, I haven't enjoyed the summer at all. And I don't just mean about Silva, I mean about everything. It's been a very unsettling time to be a Fulham fan when it shouldn't have been like this. And for that, you have to raise questions at the board. They have let everything drag on for too long. You have to raise questions at Silva. What is he not seeing? Why is he not signing? There must be a reason. So I'm glad that we have an element of potential joy at the moment where we can just relax a little bit. Obviously, there is a big elephant in the room, and that elephant is Aleksandar Mitrovic. And I think the fact is now, Jack, that Mitrovic is gone. Mitrovic is going, I should say. And there isn't any coming back from here. And you watched the game last night. He's not training with the team. Marco Silva, based on his comments today, suggests that is potentially all down to Mitrovic's own doing in terms of he's not interested anymore. He's opted out of the club, essentially. He's just waiting for the deal to be agreed. And I think he has tarnished his legacy. I'm not going to come out on here and say, I hate Aleksandar Mitrovic. I don't. What he's done for the club over these last, 5-6 years he's been an incredible player for us. And I think that's why it hurts quite a lot. I'm at the point now where I think that for everyone's sake, he has to go. And he has to go quickly because it's just going to take a negative effect on the start of our season coming up. But it's a horrible way for this all to end, and one that I really, really didn't expect, especially not from him. I think that I'm very interested to see how the club deal with it when eventually the inevitable does happen and he does go. the stories, we can't verify anything in terms of how much of a fuss he's kicked off, but the fact he's not training with the team, it's really not a good sign. And I'm very sad about this. I have to admit, I'm very sad about it, and it feels like the end of an era in the worst way possible. I think it's a bit of a kick in the teeth to the fans after we stuck by him, through, let's face it, some quite ridiculous things. Especially the Old Trafford event. I think that the reception he got for what was a quite frankly ridiculous decision by him, and I still think it was, all blown out of proportion. But let's face it, he cost us a semi-final, right? He did. Um, I'm very sad about it, and I think that it's a kick in the teeth to the fans how desperate he seems to be to want to leave. And I just want it all to be resolved very quickly now.
Yeah, it's hard because it's the first time we've sat down and spoke about this. I mean, there were rumours last week, and we sort of went, yeah, it'd be annoying, it'd be upsetting, but it really has escalated quite a lot in the last few days, and it doesn't add up for me. It doesn't add up in terms of the fallout with the club. His relationship with the club has always been very good. The relationship with the fans has always been very, very strong, and would always be very strong. And even if this all blows over, and he begs for forgiveness and he makes up with Silva, no doubt in my mind, I'm going to be there clapping him, singing his name, because ultimately, it sounds stupid. He's my favourite footballer of all time. There's been no footballer that's made me feel as happy as he. And this is tough. It's tough. So I'm not quite ready to jump on him. I'm not quite ready to say I don't like him and he's tarnished legacy. I think he has definitely damaged a lot of fans' views of him. But I'm not ready to say goodbye, and it's tough because the whole team was built around him. Silva put an arm around his shoulder when he came in and said, "Look, Parker did you wrong, and you're the main man." And that loyalty has not been repaid. That loyalty has not been repaid. We got promoted. 43 goals he scored. Kept us in the Premier League as well with his 14. Barring whatever happened last season at Old Trafford, he had a magnificent season for us. And this is the time where we can push on and go, look, you can staple yourself as a Premier League striker, prove all the doubters wrong, and we can move up the table and really, really push on. And blinded by the money in a league that I don't think is going to take off. I don't think the fan interaction is going to be as heartfelt as you're going to get at Fulham. I don't think you're going to experience that sort of love that you felt at Fulham. And I think he would regret that decision at some point, but would he then go, oh, but look at all the money I'm making for my kids, for my wife, for my family? I get it. It's so tempting. We talked about it with Silva. But I just think that it feels like I would understand it if we were in the Championship and he was desperate to play some sort of top level football. I would get it. But we're literally in the best position we've been in years. And he's our main striker. And he's the one that's gone, I'm throwing my toys at the pram. I did not see this coming at all. The Crystal Palace game, he got a wonderful reception. The Fulham fix, talk about his love for the club. Who's got in his head? This can't be down to him. It can't be his. He can't have gone. Yeah, this is. People got to have got into his head. It's really tough to talk about. Actually, it's really sad, and I don't ever want to hate a player like Mitrovic because he's given us so many good moments. Last minute winners in the Championship, Premier League goals. Some extraordinary moments and ones that I'll treasure forever. So it's very tough. And if he goes, good luck to him. If he stays, I will be on side with him again. There's still a chance. I mean, Al Hilal today literally had a offer accepted from PSG for Kylian Mbappe, the best striker in the world, and suddenly, Mitrovic could be playing alongside him. That could scupper the Mitrovic deal. I don't really know what's going on because Al Hilal are not going to pay the fee that we want. Although there seems to be an agreement now, but with this Mbappe deal, it could change everything. But there hasn't been any whispers of that up to now. It's just incredibly sad. And we've got a replacement in, not a direct replacement, but someone who can play striker, and it's Raul Jimenez. I mean, it's not a name I would have expected us to be signing, Joe, and one that I'm not necessarily too keen on. However, Marco Silva has demonstrated how he can get the best out of players, so I'm not writing him off. I'm not going to write off any signing we make this summer.
Yeah, I think when you look at Jimenez and you think Okay, so he's obviously had the absolutely terrible career-changing injury a few years ago in that game against Arsenal after his clash of heads with David Luiz, and we all thought, is he going to play again? He's very clearly not the same player now, which is very, very sad. But when I've seen him for Wolves, I think the clinicalness is not quite there, but his hold-up play I still think is quite decent at this stage, and I'm not against this signing. I think that in terms of replacing Mitrovic's goals, we need to have someone more prolific at this moment in their career. And I think we will get another striker, but as a stopgap, as another option up front for about 5.5 million, which is what it is, I think this deal is fine. And I think this deal is short term good and long term as depth still fine. I think that when you factor in the fact that we have Mitrovic, obviously set to leave, Vinicius, who obviously did well when he came on against Brentford and when he covered for Mitrovic at the end of last season. You've then got Stansfield and Muniz. I'd love to see Stansfield a bit more involved this season, but I think the most likely fact is that he will go out on loan, and I think that that's probably a good career move for him as a next step, just to get a few more minutes, maybe at a higher level in Exeter, maybe in the Championship, for example. Muniz is one that hasn't really been working out. So I actually see this as a replacement for Muniz. And I think that would mean that we would go into the Everton game with Vinicius and Jimenez as our striking options, potentially one of Muniz and Stansfield on the bench as well. And then we need to splash the Mitrovic windfall money, 50 million or something like that, on a slightly higher caliber option. But Silva said after the Brentford game he wants 3 strikers. I think this is one of them. I think Vinicius is one of them. I think we need one more. So I'm fine with this move. Last word on Mitrovic from me. The money perspective, I get that Saudi Arabia are offering absolutely silly money. Me and you can sit here, Jack, and we wouldn't probably be able to turn something like that down. I think that everyone is on the same page, that it's completely life changing. What I would say is these footballers, they're not like you and me. They don't work a 9 to 5. They're not struggling. I get that from a longer term family perspective, it's added security. Their children are going to be just fine as it stands. So that's what baffles me a little bit more, is that it's not a compulsory decision. It's not the last move of his career. Saudi Arabian league is not going anywhere. They're going from strength to strength, signing more and more players and managers. This is not his only chance to go there. I think it's career suicide, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think he's got another big move in him, or he finishes his career at Fulham. I don't get it at all. Jimenez, I'm happy with this. If it's the only replacement for Mitrovic, no, I'm not happy with it. As a like-for-like replacement right now, it's a downgrade. As an overall squad depth signing, I'm fine with it. And I think it's a Silva signing as well, which also makes me just trust it. You think, like you said, Jack, Willian, Pereira last summer, there were doubts about all of them. They all came good. Silva is a fantastic judge of player. I would really hope that he can get Jimenez playing some of his better football again.
Yeah, a new striker is always an exciting signing because they're the ones who basically are signed to deliver the goals. However, because of the injury he did ascertain against Arsenal, like you say, he hasn't quite been the same since. However, it only takes a new club, a new manager, a new set of players to completely, revitalize your career. And there's no point writing people off before they join. And yeah, final word on Mitrovic. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We need that money to spend on a new striker. The more this rumbles on, the more unsettling it could become, or the more this rumbles on, the more it could come to actually a happy conclusion for all of us fans. Because I think guns ahead, we'd all want Mitrovic to stay, even now. Even now, maybe I'm not sure. That's one to argue with
Yeah,
Mitch's side.
I think I'm in agreement, because we can't replace those goals easily, and I think it's at the stage where I wouldn't want it to just be going under the radar and suddenly Mitrovic is reintegrated with the squad. I'd want him to grovel now. I'd want a statement being like, I'm sorry for how I acted, because I think how he's acting is like a petulant child, if things are to be believed, and I have no reason to not believe it, because he's not training with the squad, and Silva says that is his decision. So I would want him to come out and say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I'll give my all for Fulham. I love the club, because the way he's been acting, it does not seem like he does, but we know he does based on previous. It baffles me. But yes, sorry to interrupt you, Jack. But yeah, I would take him back 100% because he's our talisman. But I wouldn't want him to just straight back in. No questions asked. We just love him again. He has to earn my respect back now, in my opinion, and I'm sure several fans feel the same way because I feel disrespected by the way that he's gone about this.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's the most frustrating. A player that we've absolutely adored, we've hailed for all the time he's been at his club, and you'd maybe expect this from like a Carlos Vinicius or a Rodrigo Muniz because they didn't have quite so much of a look in. But Mitro is the main man. Serbian flags in the away end. Like you're not going to get loved anywhere else as much as you did at Newcastle and Fulham. It's incredible. At Fulham, obviously, you had more years there. Let's move on because there'll be more chance to talk about this, I'm sure, as it rumbles on in the future. And the weeks are counting down now. We're less than 3 weeks away from Everton away. Well, yesterday, 2 days ago, two centre backs look fairly close. It looks like it's going to be just one signing out of Bassi and Salisu. Bassi, of course, from Ajax, former Rangers, Salisu from Southampton, relegated last season. Salisu was injured for a lot of last season, especially the tail end of it. So we never got to see him play at St Mary's against Fulham. But the general consensus is, and I can't sit here and say that I've studied the game so much that I know their game inside out, that the preference from Fulham fans would be Salisu. However, you do think back to that Rangers run in the Europa League, and Bassi was absolutely extraordinary. Like I do remember watching him and thinking he was very good. And when he moved to Ajax, I was like, that's a good move for him because we were linked with him. Other Premier League teams were linked with him. And now, 21 million euros, he's actually on the verge of joining. But there is a rumour right now surfacing that the feeling is that the preference from Fulham is Salisu. And I would be more happy with the signing of the latter, Joe. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they'd both be good signings, but I think if gun to my head right now, who would I want this second? I think Salisu, but I think Bassi's got the highest ceiling and the potential to become a far better player than Salisu is. So it's a very tricky one. I'd personally bring in both
Mm.
if we have the funds. I like that Bassi can cover left back. I like that Salisu can drift across to the right centre back position if necessary. Both played in three at the back systems. I think there's a lot of versatility there, especially when there's a bit of uncertainty at the moment remaining regarding Tosin. Tim Ream's not back from injury yet. So I think that I would like both, to be honest. But yeah, right now I'd want Salisu. It seems like Fabrizio Romano is saying that your mate Jack,
Oh, interesting.
Fabrizio Romano is saying that we are looking at Bassi. Sky is saying that we're maybe inching towards Salisu. So it's like, who do you believe? Potentially none of them know. I think that Bassi sounds like the slightly more expensive option, but as I say, for longevity, I mean, he's younger. He's probably got a lot more years in the game in him. Slightly less injury prone than Salisu as well. It's a really interesting one. What does seem to be the case is that we will sign one of them unless something goes wrong. So touch wood, hopefully that happens because we do need another high quality centre back, and I think that both of them would fit that bill. And it seems like, along with Jimenez, who's reportedly had a medical on Monday, Craven Cottage, I should say at Motspur Park, to move to Craven Cottage, this will be our second signing of the summer. We're also linked with another defender, maybe more low key, is that Ballo Torre from AC Milan would potentially come in as our backup left back. We've apparently agreed a €4 million fee with AC Milan, and he's just weighing up whether he wants to move across to England or stay in Italy. And a lot of people might say, oh, it's the Premier League, why wouldn't you want to move? But I do understand that some players want to stay in a different country. Some players don't want to move. And let's face it, he'd be a backup as well. So I think he needs a bit of convincing to come and be second fiddle to Robinson. But, that's another option for depth and would be the Kozawa replacement for this season.
Mm. And Liva Kazawa starting for PSG the other day in their friendly. Um,
Yeah.
it's a good one. It's a good point that we have. Tosin's obviously still floating about. Spurs are in for him. Napoli are in for him. PSG are in for him. But he could still be at the club come Everton away and could be useful. However, if we went into a scenario where we had Diop, Ream, and one of Bassi Salisu, I'd feel quite comfortable with that, knowing that Tosin was going to get his move anyway. And suddenly I'm thinking we need a fourth. centre-back through the door. And that's something to look for when Tosin does go. Because I think we could get a good fee for Tosin, 15 million minimum, maybe, especially if the big boys are after him. That's definitely something to ponder. So one more player to speak about, and then we talk about how we're feeling going into this new season, because there's still a lot of uncertainty. There really is. Last night was pretty reassuring in terms of we can still play football and score goals, and Marco's still going to be here, but there's still a lot of questions and there's still a lot of anxiety coursing through the fan base. Final player to talk about is Callum Hudson-Odoi. We've covered him on the transfer show. He's now apparently agreed terms with us. Lazio is still in for him. He's obviously a Chelsea boy. Moving to Fulham would be, easy, really. He wouldn't have to change location. He'd be on a good amount of money, and he's got a chance to completely revitalise his career after his spells in his spell in Germany, where it didn't quite work out for him. I'm for this, but I think he's a talented lad who's definitely got something about him, and it's just another wide option, Joe, because at the moment our wide options are pretty thin.
Yeah, I think that was the position that we've almost been torn apart in the most. When you think that Solomon's gone, James has gone, Cabano's gone, Willian nearly didn't come back. That was the riskiest position as we were looking into the season. And now it's great that Willian's there. So we have him on the left, Harry Wilson on the right, Bobby Reid as well. We need at least one more. I would say we need two more wingers, but Callum Hudson-Odoi as a left wing understudy to Willian for a season or two, I think it's fantastic. I think would be a great signing. Jacob Steinberg, who's a very reliable reporter for The Guardian, he's got contacts at Chelsea. Clearly, he normally gets a lot of their stories first. He's saying we're currently looking to pay about 4 million for Callum Hudson-Odoi, and Chelsea want up to 8 million. And I think up to 8 million is still a very good deal. I mean, he's got 1 year left. It wasn't long ago that they were rejecting 50 million from Bayern Munich. He's only 20 years old. There's a lot of room for growth. I think it's very cheap, and I think that it's a good option, and I think that he will want to probably stay in London. I mean, I can't speak for him, but like you say, he wouldn't have to move house. Cobham to Moxburgh Park is not exactly a million miles away, is it? It's just up the road. So I would like to see this one get done. In an ideal world, you'd like to have, Jimenez looks to be the closest, Bassi/Salisu, one of them, Callum Hudson-Odoi in ahead of Everton. You're then thinking, the more depth options like a Ballo Touré or whoever else we bring in. We can afford to wait a little bit longer with those. They're not as urgent. I mean, it would be good to get them. Do not get me wrong. But, we need to prioritize the ones that are going to be more involved in the season. And Callum Hudson-Odoi is someone that would be wonderful to start/bring off the bench in those early season games. Because the squad, Jack, and I guess we can talk about this now, we're currently, as we left off last season in terms of the starting 11, nothing has officially changed. Obviously, you've got to factor in the fact that Mitrovic will probably go and Palhinha is currently injured. But aside from that, you've got the injuries to Pereira and Ream. We don't know when they're going to be back. The fact they've both gone on the US tour suggests it's not a million miles away. We're no weaker in terms of the starting 11. We're weaker in terms of depth, but we have time to rectify that. I'm not feeling bad about the start of this season. I'm feeling a little bit concerned about the gaps that we do have to fill, but I was expecting us to be in a worse position this time last week when Palhinha was being linked away. Mitrovic, was still being linked away. We weren't sure about any centre-backs coming in. We weren't sure about Callum Hudson-Odoi. We had no Mitrovic backup coming in. I feel a little bit better, but there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Absolutely. I think what concerns me most is the fixtures. Because if you lose Everton away, you've got Brentford at home. Obviously, we played them last night, but it's not going to be easy the way in which they play, even with no Ivan Toney. And then obviously you've got Arsenal and City away. There is a scenario here where I could see us on 0 points or 1 point from 4. And then we have to beat Luton. You literally have to beat Luton. So that makes me nervous. Albeit, we went to Goodison Park last season, won very, very well. And I think we could do that again. And a player who I'm putting a lot of my faith into this season is Harry Wilson. I do think he had a slow start due to his injury last season. And once he came back in the team, the performances against Leeds and Everton were really good. And, there is something about him. He's dyed his hair blonde. He's ready for the new season. And he scored a wonderful goal last night. Another player we now have to put our faith into is Sasha Lukic, a player who I was just not sure was even going to be around this season. But I feel like he's grown into his time at Fulham. He's obviously, come in January, and now he's had a few months under his belt. He hasn't played a load of minutes, but he's going to be a key player for us next season. He's someone that we shouldn't be forgetting about. Harrison Reed, brilliant last season. He was brilliant last season. Brilliant last night again. Consistent, underrated. Should be, for me, in a shout of an England squad shot. Even if James Ward-Prowse does move to the Premier League at some point, Reed for me is just a phenomenal player. James Ward-Prowse gets put in the squad because of his set pieces. When I think that on the football, Harrison Reed's a better player. I'm not concerned about the depth that much if we get what looks like it's going to come in, is going to come in. Because then Babu can still play it right back. I know that will make fans very nervous. If Balotelli does come in, we've got a left back cover. If Bassi does come in, we've got another left back cover. We're not in an awful situation, and we will understand probably this time next week. We'll know the extent of Palhinha's injury. I think that will just keep him out of a move. I think we will have Palhinha next season, and whether we have to sacrifice losing him for the first 2 or 3 games because he's injured, meaning he's not going to get his move. For me, I'll take that. Because West Ham is still swarming. Liverpool is still interested. But yeah, I'm concerned about the fixtures, I think. And if we don't get off to a good start after an unsettling summer, this is my next question to you. Do you see ourselves being in a relegation battle next season?
I think with the squad as it is right this second, and with the depth that we currently have, and obviously that will improve, when you factor in losing Mitrovic, I think that we'll have a much tougher season. I don't necessarily think that, we're going to be, backs against the wall really struggling, but I think that, we'll be in the conversation, put it that way. And I think that it's something that we can 100% get out of, but we need to strengthen. The squad currently is not good enough. It's in a much better position than it was this time last year, and look how we fared. So, but at this moment, yeah, you can't rule us out. I mean, there's squads that are weaker, there's teams that are weaker. I could probably name 4 or 5 right now, and that in itself is very positive because this has to be another year of just consolidation, strengthening, trying to push on as much as we can. But, if you offered me a place that's safe next season, I'd probably take it right now. Yeah. I'm not looking to Europe next season. That's a longer term goal if you can prove that you are worthy, not just with a good season like last season, but with consistent, top 10 finishes, top half finishes. So yes, I think that as it stands right now, next season will be tough. But I still think that we've got the squad and the manager to get out of it, and the money available to recruit the players that get us the depth we need to steer clear.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it from this point of view, like, when you don't upgrade the squad or you don't get in as many signs as you thought, you think, oh, you're going to hit in for a tough season. But I know it's just a friendly, and I know we've got 2 more, and I think Villa looked very good last night, very dangerous. We played good We do play good football, even with players who,
Yeah.
I can't believe we're still underappreciating them. Players like Bobby D, Cordova-Reid, they're Premier League quality players. I think it's just that sort of anxiety that sort of gets you, and that's why you're sort of second guessing everything, because nothing right now is crystal clear about our squad come the end of August. But you look at, if we were to make no signings whatsoever and keep all the players that we have, we should have another very strong season. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to finish 10th. I think we'd finish lower than that. But we do, it's part of football. You do need to upgrade. And I think we will upgrade, and I think we will get on a level playing field to what we were last season. And I think we should, with that squad, have a solid season. With the competition, it's easy to point your finger at Luton and Sheffield United and say, well, I don't think they're going to be very good. You look at Bournemouth's recruitment and go, that's very exciting, a new manager. And my final point is to say this. If we are the worst case scenario would be Fulham are in trouble all season. Marco Silva's not committing. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He lets it run out. We've got relegated. He's obviously tried his best to keep us up. Suddenly we're in the Championship with no manager. And we'd have to start planning in ahead. And obviously I'm getting way ahead of myself here, and that's just a worst case scenario. And there will be assets to sell. But I'm hoping we have a great season, Joe, and I think we'll be okay.
I feel a lot more positive about Fulham today than I did last week, and then again that I did the week before. So I think we're getting there. Um, and yeah, last night was a confidence booster when you see, yeah, our team is still very good, and we can cut it. I mean, that was basically Brentford's first choice 11,
Mm.
minus Tony, who's obviously missing the first half of the season. And you just think, well, we can compete with them. We're going to strengthen more. I know it's a friendly, but we're both prepping for the same thing, right? We're both playing in a couple of weeks at Craven Cottage. We're both at the same point in pre-season, and currently we're slightly ahead because I think that we did a job against them and we played very well. They created some good chances against us as well. We're going to strengthen more to hopefully shore up at the back slightly more. But I think there were positive signs, and I think there's positive signs in the transfer market, positive signs on the manager front. And we just need to sort the Mitrovic situation ASAP because right now, that's the only thing lingering over us. I think everything else is becoming quite positive. We need to sort that. And I think that means he has to go. And I think that means we need to recruit a replacement. That can also bring excitement. We haven't needed a first choice striker since the 2017 winter window when we signed Mitrovic. It's one of these things where we can afford to maybe play a different way. And I'd love to see what Marco Silva thinks because there'll be a contingency plan for every single player being lost to injury or transfer. So they will have something up their sleeve. I hope it's good enough to keep the goals coming in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was on the radio the other night and it was very much doom and gloom because it was before the Silva news had come out that he was staying, and I was thinking that the Mitrovic leaving could be a huge domino effect on Silva and Palhinha. But right now, we might lose our best player that we've had in years in Mitrovic, and the way he's gone about it, it can be easily forgotten because that was his choice. Um, well, of course, it won't be easily forgotten, but we can get over it at some point, and that's just the worst thing that's happened right now. No one's gone yet. No one's left. I would still think the Fred rumours are going to come back as well. That's all gone very quiet. We'll speak more about this next week. There's still a long time to go in the window. I suspect on deadline day we're going to be very busy as well, as usual. So I'm looking forward to start the season. There's still a lot to look forward to. The new away shirt's going to come out soon. We're hearing it's going to be pink, which could be amazing. That's just a rumor. Um, Obviously, we've got the opening games of the season. It's all very fast approaching. And after a very slow June and a worrying July, hopefully everything just works itself out. We go to Goodison and get a nice 3 points the opening day of the season. How nice would that be, Joe?
That would be absolutely sensational. Then follow it up with a win against the Bees. It would just be wonderful. And just thinking of that is getting me excited. The Everton ticket details are out. We can all start planning for the new season. And I can't wait to be back.
Oh, right. Well, my phone's charging over there, so I must have missed that. I'm going to be booking Everton as soon as possible because we've already got our trains up. Joe, well, let's leave it there for today. We'll be back next week. Whether we're in your ears or you're watching us on YouTube, we will be back talking more Fulham. And I'm very excited to see what happens against Aston Villa and Chelsea. And I think we're in, let's look positively at this season. There's no point going in with negative attitudes because that's what we thought last season. We were completely flipped 180 after the draw against Liverpool. And it was all pretty decent from there. So let's see. Joe, for the first time this season, thanks so much for being here.
No worries, Jack. Pleasure as always. Thanks everyone for watching.
Right, guys, we'll see you when we see you. I'm sure there'll be more rumours. I'm sure there'll be more excitement to talk about. It's very close to season starting now. Thanks so much for watching. We can't wait for the brand new season here on the Fulhamish YouTube channel. Please share with all your friends, subscribe, and we really can't wait for it all to get underway. And yeah, we will see you next week. And for the first time this season, come on, Fulham.